Hello friends of the YouTube channel International Law. Thank you for subscribing to our YouTube channel and sharing everything about international law, security, compliance, anti-corruption, anti-crime, and business. With Martin Arostegui, is a recognized and experienced journalist, especially in military and intelligence issues, who has covered the type of international conflicts that we are now watching the deploying in Ukraine. He has worked for Voice of America, Wall Street Journal, the Daily Telegraph, the Washington Times, CNN, Fox News, and France 24. And he is the author of a book of military special operation called Twilight Warriors. Thank you and sharing this video.
Hi, Christian. How are you?
We continue to talk about Ukraine. We continue about.
Yes. Well, we're now in the 10th day of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and things don't seem to be going very well for Vladimir Putin. His forces appear to be completely bogged down. He has very serious supply and logistical problems. They aren't moving nearly as quickly as he predicted, or as anyone might have expected, given the size. Much more fierce resistance, much stronger resistance than he obviously anticipated, and that the world anticipated. He has yet, on the 10th day of the invasion, Christian, more than 1 week into it, he has yet to take one major city. Okay, I think the Ukrainians gave him one, more or less. The military just turned it over. They abandoned it. So they had Kherson in the southeast. I think they need the troops for Kiev, so they more or less turned it over. But even there, I mean, the Russians supposedly they have it, but they don't control it. I mean, there was a massive anti-Russian demonstration in the center of Kherson today or yesterday, and the Russians they didn't do anything. I mean, they had to let it happen. They didn't seem to react. So we don't know. They may do so again. The whole situation very fluid, of course. But this is the situation. I mean, Mariupol, which they should have had by now, they're fighting like hell. I mean, they haven't been able to break the resistance there. The defenses, the Ukrainian defenses there, and they're even having to resort to stuff like using the humanitarian corridors agreed to in the negotiations they're maintaining with Zelensky's government to sneak in troops into Mariupol and advance, using the ceasefire period to try to advance their forces into Mariupol, even deceptive tactics like that, which is, I mean, it's pretty pathetic for a country as supposedly as sophisticated as Russia to have to resort to those tactics to try to advance against the city. And again, Mariupol is in the south. It's very close to the region that Russia already controls in Crimea and the Donbass. I mean, that should have been a walkover for them. That should have been. They should have had that by now, and they're still struggling. And as I say, they're using these humanitarian corridors that are set up now through the negotiations in Mariupol to try to take advantage of them and hoodwink the Ukrainian defenders into allowing them to advance, advancing. So, I mean, the resistance in Ukraine is massive. I mean, it's every indication is. I mean, in all the cities that are under siege, a lot of them are Kharkiv, Kiev, and the Russians have been entirely surrounded, if not partially surrounded. The resistance is on the part of the population. I mean, there really seems to be no desire or willingness to give up fight. And I'm not just talking about the rhetoric of the top leaders, Zelensky and so forth. It does seem to be the general attitude of the population. They're just signing up in huge numbers. Every able-bodied male, apparently, signing up to fight the Russians. They're distributing weapons, and they're getting in massive quantities from abroad, from Europe, the US, and all the NATO countries. They're arriving through Western Ukraine, which has yet to be controlled by Russia. There's very little activity, Russian activity in the western bulge of Ukraine, which mainly borders Poland, and where the resistance is probably setting up all kinds of bases. Well, they are. I mean, they're setting up bases for warehouse equipment coming in and distribution channels into the contested areas, mainly around Kiev at this stage, which obviously the priority target. And there are reports of a lot of U.S. or NATO Black Hawk helicopters making cross-border insertions from Poland. I've explained to you in the last podcast that the very advanced the very highly enhanced Black Hawk called the payload, which is equipped with all kinds of forward infrared radar and that kind of thing, which allows them to fly at night and operate at very low levels through contours and stay off radar for very, very extended periods. So this is the kind of thing that's going on. Military aid is being put in along with the humanitarian aid for the Ukrainian people, which are leaving again in massive numbers. You already have a refugee within a week. You have 1 million Ukrainian refugees leaving, going into Poland, Romania, and other neighboring countries, and Moldova. So lesser amounted to Moldavia. I mean, it's staggering. So this is the situation that Russia is confronted with. Now, aside from the resistance, which I may add, aside from the civilians, militias, and the regular Ukraine military, which is already addressing hundreds of thousands of armed people, a Ukrainian special operations unit composed between 2,000 and 3,000, highly trained, apparently, very effectively trained by U.S. and British special forces, which have been actively training Ukrainian special operations units for this kind of war in Ukraine for the past several years. The operation of Javelin missiles and ambush tactics, encrypted communications, jamming systems, which allows them to communicate by the Russians and also allows them to even intercept Russian communication and triangulate with satellite images and satellite information, intelligence information from satellite being sent to them, are operating with extreme efficiency. I mean, they're taking out a large amount of the Russian army here. The pictures speak for themselves. I mean, you're now getting video after video of entire columns of decimated Russian tanks, armored vehicles, and trucks, and all types of logistical systems which have been totally gutted, destroyed. This is obviously holding up the Russian offensive, as well as, I think, a morale problem inside the Russian army. Although reports are sketchy, they're mainly based on what Ukrainians have managed to gather from hundreds of captured Russian soldiers. The morale inside the Russian army is very poor. Russian soldiers say that they weren't even informed that they were going to invade Ukraine, that it was part of an exercise that they were going, or that they were going there to liberate the Ukrainians from a Nazi government, this kind of thing. They were going to be greeted as liberators with flowers and kisses and wine. And this was the impression that Russian soldiers were given when they went into Ukraine. They weren't prepared, psychologically prepared, for the kind of resistance that they're encountering. And this may be leading to some very serious morale problems in the army. And maybe the Air Force as well. I mean, from what I can see, Russia, although they have used air bombardment, they have not yet, from what again, this is my understanding, this is my view of it, I may be mistaken, but they have not yet brought to bear the full capacity of the Air Force on Ukraine. In the indiscriminate bombings that they have conducted against major cities, mainly their Kharkiv, has been the target of this type of action, to much lesser extent Kiev, although it's been reported quiet there for the past 24 hours. Maybe Russian Air Force pilots as well will not, perhaps, I mean, I'm guessing at this, may not be prepared to conduct indiscriminate air strikes against civilian targets in the urban area. To think that a military like this is prepared, except maybe some highly trained elite units. They say that there are 400 members of the Wagner group already operating inside Kiev, hunting for Zelensky. But I mean, this is not enough to take a city. I mean, without this, if the army is indeed in a poor state of morale and unable and probably unprepared for the kind of resistance they're encountering, this kind of military could not possibly engage certainly not on a long-term basis, on the type of brutal, bloody street-by-street fighting which would be required to control and effectively take Kiev and any of the other main cities, which is the reason that none of them have been taken so far, is what I believe. Supply problems may also be an endemic problem in the Russian army. I think there's like many third world armies, actually, there's a lot of corruption in the army. And a lot of supplies are sold by corrupt officers, generals, and before they reach the troops, because a lot of the Ukrainian soldiers, which again, a lot of the Russian soldiers, which again the Ukrainians say they have captured and interrogated, appear to be very hungry. They have no food. They say they haven't eaten. They're not eating. In effect, they go around asking, the first thing they ask for when they're captured is food. Some of them have turned themselves over so they can be fed. So again, I emphasize, please, I mean, information is sketchy, situation is very fluid, but this appears to be the picture that is emerging. So in view of the situation, the only alternative for Putin would be to simply, well, he's taken over 2 nuclear plants, apparently. Not contradicting initial reports, he did not target the reactors. I think he wanted them intact, so that he may be able to get him the leverage to threaten to cut off electricity to Kiev and some other of the main cities as a way of forcing them to surrender. He's going to use indiscriminate bombings, or he's already doing this to some extent, although not to the full extent one might expect. Not in Kiev. I think in Kharkiv he has done this. Indiscriminate bombings of civilian areas. So this is what he's going to have to do. This appears to be the only option he has at the moment, if the state of his army, if the reports about the state of his army are true, to subdue the Ukrainians, to get them to surrender or come to at least a conditional terms.
Is new scenario for Putin administration, the people resisting Ukraine. Today is 8 days of the invasion to this crime, international crime of Putin.
10 days. 10 days.
10 days. It's 10 days.
10 days. 10
yeah,
days. 10 days.
The Ukrainian resistance is very important now. What is the next step for doing the Putin dictatorship do? You think it's a little too? Yeah.
As I said, I mean, if his army is in no shape for the kind of intense, brutal, spirited urban combat that would be necessary to take Kiev or any of the other main cities for that matter. His only alternative is to try to bomb them into submission, standoff. He has used cluster bombs. These are the bombs that explode in midair and drop bomblets all over the place. It's very dangerous because a lot of them may not explode and children may pick them up. It's often used against children, or maybe dropped in their schools where children pick up the bombs and they explode in their hands. And, it's a horrible, brutal, horrible bomb. It's banned by 100 countries around the world. And there are reports that he has the equipment to launch thermobaric bombs. These are bombs that these are considered, in essence, this almost is on the borderline of being a fuel, compressed fuel that causes an explosion in the air that sucks up the oxygen and literally sucks the oxygen out of people's lungs and vaporize their bodies, and they are used to destroy any static defensive positions over a large area. He could use this. There are reports that he used them in Kharkiv. Frankly, I don't think he has used them yet, but he does seem to have them there as the TOS-1 launch vehicle, which is the delivery system for these missiles. In missile form, they can also be dropped by air from airplanes. So this is another weapon you could use for having in cities. But you're already talking about very, very serious weapons that border on mass destruction, some of which are illegal, and would cause massive amounts of civilian casualties and destruction of civilian areas. You're talking about something completely indiscriminate. Indiscriminate killing on a massive scale. And whether Putin and his generals are prepared to go this far is yet questionable. As mean as the Russians are, this brings the war to a different level. And they haven't yet resorted to this, although undoubtedly they're threatening to. And who knows? And they may well do it. They may well do it if Putin gets desperate enough. Again, we don't know the internal situation within the Putin regime at this stage. From one report I read, with unattributable sources, there are Russians within the Kremlin saying that Putin decided to do this very much on his own. That he did this through directly in orders to his defense minister, who was in the combat theater, and I believe it might well be there now, with his own personal appointee, of course, one of his most trusted advisors, been with Putin all his life, throughout their careers. And that the Kremlin, people in the Kremlin within his cabinet and so on, were really consulted about the decision to go through the Ukraine invasion at the scale that he's done it. It was assumed in the Duma and among his government that he would limit himself to an incursion in the Donbass region to support the separatists in Luhansk and Donetsk that had declared separate republics and requested Russian recognition. It was believed among his circle that this is what they will be limited to. But the all-out invasion that he's ordered, something that even his own government was not prepared for. Again, these are reports, third-party reports, but third-hand, second and third hand. But this appears to be his situation. Again, a coup against Putin would be very difficult to implement, assuming that there is sufficient discontent within his own ruling regime to do this, and the sanctions that have been leveled against the Soviet Union begin to bite on his against Russia. Begin to really take their toll on the economy and on his own inner circle, which they're very targeted against. They're confiscating all the bank deposits, the yachts, the luxury homes, all the overseas investments of his inner circle of billionaires, of oligarchs, are all being taken, are all being confiscated. in an almost Hollywood-esque sense. I mean, one of these people tried to take their yacht out of its mooring in the south of France. They were intercepted by the French Coast Guard. It's really taking on quite dramatic proportions. Russia is totally, well, the banking system has completely been cut off. He still has the, he's still selling oil. That they had not managed so far to embargo, and there's no hope. I frankly don't think they will. I mean, that is the weak point of the West. That is the NATO's Achilles heel. They need Russian gas and oil in Europe, in the United States as well. They buy Russian gas and oil, and so do a lot of other countries. China certainly is not going to stop buying its Russian fuel from Russia. In fact, they may even increase the supply coming in from Russia. India has said that they will not stop buying Russian oil and gas, and neither would any of the major third world clients. So the oil revenues are going to keep coming in, no question about it. That's not the cutoff of that is not going to happen anytime, certainly not anytime soon. So as long as he has that coming in, he can pay his general to keep his army going and fuel his trucks and tanks and airfare. And but that's the situation. As to how long, again, I mean, a coup, and furthermore, as I was saying, a coup against Putin would be very hard to execute. He's a long-time operative, high-level operative of the KGB. He knows all about coups, having instigated several himself, surrounded by other people who also know all about coups and know exactly how to dismantle them and intercept them, and keep surveillance on whatever suspicious suspects it may be that could launch one or organize one. So I am doubtful of the prospect of any internal coup against Putin, unfortunately. Yes, unfortunate, because a lot of people have said that this is seems to be the only way that this conflict could be brought to a quick end.
Now, the International Criminal Court is open to case for international crime of Putin, and the principal prosecutor is open the cause for investigating the Russian invasion in Ukraine. That's possible a new order in this scenario in international justice, international court, criminal court?
Well, I mean, we'll see what happens. I mean, what Putin has done is a direct challenge to international law. I mean, an invasion on this scale hasn't happened since Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait in the 1990s. It's something that is it's just a challenge to to international law, to the international order, which really hasn't happened before, because before, previous invasions have been conducted by non-nuclear powers like Iraq. Iraq had a huge army, but it did not have nuclear weapons, so therefore it could be sufficient Western force or U.S. force was enough to deal with it. We're dealing here with the world's prime nuclear power. I mean, Russia has more nuclear warheads than any other country in the world. So it can threaten the use of nuclear retaliation against anyone who would interfere with this. And ultimately, international law has to be backed by force. when Saddam Hussein broke international law, violated international law by invading Kuwait, it was enforced by basically the U.S. Army, right, with the help of some European allies, or else he might still be there today. So, if without being able to enforce international law, it's very difficult. This could either be called a collapse of international law, because if you're strong enough, you can challenge it. Anyone who's strong enough as nuclear powers can challenge international law anytime they like. Or perhaps if international pressure on Russia builds to such an extent, both military, diplomatic, humanitarian, and economic, and support for the Ukrainian resistance is to such an extent that Russia fails as a result of that, then yeah, I mean, you can bring international law to bear and try Putin as a war criminal and his top defense minister and top generals. So I would say that's the situation.
That's true.
Vis-a-vis international law.
I remember the last podcast when you talk about the China interest in this world agreement. Now we talk about the natural resource, how lithium. You talk about the lithium. I remember this interesting next step of China, maybe to attack Taiwan. Is possible or is not possible?
Well, it's interesting, and Christian, as I said, China is obviously keeping a very close eye on Ukraine.
He's watching. Yeah.
Perhaps watching it very closely. But perhaps the lesson they're taking, or the analysis they're giving to Russia's experience in their invasion of Ukraine, would probably dissuade them from trying to do the same in Taiwan. I mean, imagine in the Ukraine, again, assuming in the Ukraine, Russia had all the advantages, had every possible military advantage. They had the country surrounded, vastly superior military to the Ukrainians. They have, they had nuclear weapons at their disposal. In Taiwan, they don't have a land frontier. China does not have a land frontier with Taiwan. It's separated by over 100 miles of ocean, which they have to cross to land a force to take Taiwan. And the resistance from Taiwan, which would be far stronger militarily, which is far stronger militarily than Ukraine. They've got an air force. Ukraine virtually doesn't have an air force. Taiwan has a pretty modern air force with F-16s and another American aircraft and a very strong anti-aircraft system, air defense system. To maintain a force supplied and mobilized in Taiwan, a Chinese army in Taiwan, with the kind of logistical problems that would entail to supply them across 100 miles of ocean, with two very strong navies against them, that of the United States and Japan, intercepting their convoys and supply vessels, would be, I would say, impossible. Very, very difficult. So I think any Chinese contemplation of invasion of Taiwan, seeing the kind of luck that Russia's having in dealing with the Ukrainian resistance, I think would have to be what's happening to Russia and Ukraine, I think would sway the Chinese from trying anything.
Yeah, it's true. It's watching, yeah. It's impossible. It's impossible in this moment, really.
Unless they're prepared to use extreme weapons of mass destruction. They're prepared to nuke Taiwan or use highly destructive weapons like thermobaric on a massive scale over a long period of time. It would be very difficult, even more difficult for the Chinese to take Taiwan than it would for the Russians to take Ukraine. So they may be drawing a negative lesson from what is happening in Ukraine. Or any future military venture into Taiwan.
Okay. That's for conclusion, dear Martin Arostegui.
Well, we were going to talk about the lithium, I think, weren't we? An interesting piece of business news. An American company has just launched Franklin Mining of Nevada, have just opened a lithium mine in Argentina, in the Andean Argentine province of Catamarca, which is part of the lithium triangle in Bolivia, which is Argentina, Bolivia, and Chile, which has some of the largest lithium reserves in the world, which is now one of the top strategic minerals. It's used to make to reduce CO2 emissions. And while it was believed that China and Russia may have had a monopoly on lithium, an American company, Franklin Mining, has just announced a joint venture with a Argentine firm, I believe it's a state-run company, to exploit lithium in over 10,000-acre reserve in Catamarca, which is interesting. It's an interesting project, which is with the current supply of lithium, demand for lithium is a very, very important project. Already, the demand for lithium outstrips supply. The demand for lithium has grown over the past year by 25%. Supply has only grown by 21%. So a rush to control lithium, which the Chinese are trying very desperately to control in a virtual international cartel to their own supplies, is substantial, as well as cornering the lithium reserves in Latin America, Africa, and other places. Is a very, very, very important.
Very important project.
One of their top priorities. And an American firm, Franklin Mining, has gone into Argentina to challenge it. Very interesting.
Interesting. Catamarca is a province in northwest Argentina, bordering Chile. It is
Bolivia,
and Bolivia too.
That's the lithium triangle, where the main lithium reserves are contained. Mm-hmm.
Very interesting project.
And Russia apparently is getting involved as well. I mean, I believe the Bolivian foreign minister was in Russia late last year, quite recently. He signed a series of joint ventures with Gazprom. He met with Lavrov. He was received by Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov. And I think they concluded a series of joint projects with Gazprom for both gas, Bolivian gas, where there's already a participation by Gazprom, as well as lithium mining. The Russians are also apparently going to get a lithium mining concessions in Bolivia, together with the Chinese, which already control a great deal of it in Bolivia.
Yeah, I remember the interest in the Gazprom interest in Bolivia with this joint venture with the Bolivian government is other case for analysis in the next podcast. Okay, dear friends, subscribe to YouTube channel and share this video with the most important report in the Saturday. Thank you, Martin Arostegui. See you.
Thank you, Christian.
Saturday.
Thank you very much.
Talk to you later. Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye.
Bye, Martin. Bye, friends. Thank you so much. Subscribe to YouTube channel and sharing all content about international law and security and compliance and business too. We talk about all in this podcast.